Now let's talk generations for a moment.
Yeah.
We were just talking about the NAACP celebrating its 100 years, and I've
Yes.
heard a lot of people call into radio and say,
Yeah.
National Association for Advancement of Colored People, that sounds so old, that's
Right.
not me.
Yeah.
And yet the issues they're working on are issues
Yeah.
that young people are going through.
Yeah.
How would you describe the relationship in your generation of
Yeah.
the political work and the cultural work?
Well, I think there sometimes is a gap, and I think that art is a place where that gap starts to mend. Because I think, I was doing some research today actually and looking at has there been a relationship with NAACP and hip hop, and I saw that they're starting to use hip hop in some of their sort of community outreach methods. So I think, in that sense, for me when I was young, I did have it from my parents, but in terms of other kind of political issues, particularly coming out of the African American community, hip hop was sort of my bridge into that world, and it came through artists like Public Enemy, Chuck D, KRS-One, people who were bringing, really complex ideas around Black nationalism or the Black arts movement, or ideas that maybe I wasn't getting in school, but it was coming through their songs. So I think in the same way, there's been a rise in hip hop activism in the last 15 years, and it's been a way to sort of politicize young people or make them aware, or make them question, or see that there's really complex political issues which are directly relevant to their experience. And I think sometimes organizations, work behind the scenes, or they're working in the sort of political arena and maybe don't have the voice or the language to connect with young people. And usually that's where art can come in and kind of create a bridge. There was a project I was involved with called Project 2050, which was an amazing example of this. It was sponsored by New World Theater. And it was a project kind of looking at that year 2050 and the shifts in sort of the racial dynamics in this country, because there are major shifts that are going to happen. And what would that mean to our communities? And so they reflected that in the sort of programming of the project. And they would actually bring in political scholars each day to present to 15 to 17, 18-year-olds, really these amazing political ideas about social justice issues. But then immediately we'd go off with poets and DJs and theater artists and translate it into art.
So you've probably thought about this stuff a lot.
Yeah.
Have you come up with an answer for why you, as a young white guy, was so attracted to Black culture? What's in it for you?
It's a very complex question, and it's a challenging one because there's a lot of issues around white appropriation of Black culture.
Because a lot of people think, they're coming in to steal, and
there's a
it's
history
just about
of that.
Cool and fashion.
There's a history of that, and I think something about it is commitment. That's one question: is this something that you do in your 20s because you think it's cool, or is this part of your life journey? But I think for me, coming up, as a young white rapper, MC, poet, in the time that I was at that time in the early 90s when I first started performing. The majority of hip-hop events that you went to were still majority Black audiences or audiences of color, and you kind of had to navigate yourself and move humbly and maybe sit through content that made you uncomfortable and hear content that was very challenging of white supremacy or white privilege. And, I remember being in the New Eurekan Poets Cafe, and some of this content was coming up in the writing, and a bunch of white people would, leave out of the room. And for me, I came to realize later that was an example of white privilege. I can leave the room and no longer be in the conversation. I decided to stay and sort of sit in the fire of that moment and sort of learn and be challenged. And I think for me, that's what it's been about. It's about commitment. Also, when I do my work, sometimes I will be challenged, or people will question why are you part of this culture? What are you contributing? Are you co-opting? And for me, it's about staying in the dialogue, because there is contradictions the moment, someone white gets involved with Black culture. But it's about how do we stay in the dialogue? What's the commitment to the research? Yeah.
What role does theater play in all of this? Because you've actually gone on to work in theater now in two continents.
Yeah, no, it's true, and actually all over the world. Hip hop is theatrical in its earliest roots. If you look at Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force, and you look at their use of costume and mythology, you look at one of their shows, that's a theater show. They were influenced by Parliament Funkadelic and Sun Ra, and then you look at Dougie Fresh, great beatboxer, and he would have lighting cues, 2 DJs. Storytelling. The way that a hip hop artist kind of tells their stories, to me, is inherently theatrical. But this whole hip-hop theater movement kind of emerged in the late 80s, early 90s. Jam on the Groove was actually an early example of that, which was a piece that came out of Ghetto Original Productions, which was a piece that involved people like Quickstep and Rockefeller from Full Circle, Crazy Legs, and Popmaster Fable from Rocksteady Crew. And this was one of the early moments of hip-hop theater. But it was happening in London with Jonesy D and Lyrical Fearta, where he was a hip-hop artist who was also trained in contemporary dance, who wanted to use this form of hip-hop to tell stories that because maybe you don't always want to be in the club at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe there's other emotional dynamics you want to explore, other kinds of stories. So theater is a place where all disciplines are welcome. You know what I mean? And I think it's also about reevaluating what is theater.
And does the audience in a hip-hop theater behave differently from audiences in other theaters? Other theaters, very polite, very quiet.
I think so. I think it does challenge that. That already happened in the Black arts movement. In the 60s and 70s in New York, people were challenging what a theater audience is. And the Living Theater was doing that from a multiracial context, right? By participatory theater, call and response, get the audience on stage, break down the fourth wall. That's a tradition throughout.
The full circle comes around.
It comes full.
I want you to throw to the performance that you're going to do with Jaco.
Well, basically, I'm going to share some freestyle improvisation because that's, my work in playback is a big part of that. So we're gonna show you a performance in just a few minutes of freestyle, which will be completely improvised. And I'd actually like to get some words from you that I can incorporate in this freestyle.
Yeah.
Any words that come to mind?
I was liking feeling the change. How about still feeling the change?
Still feeling the change. And what about 2 other words that I can sort of incorporate there, based on your conversations today or things that have come up that you're thinking about in this moment?
You really put me on the spot here.
Okay, good.
Now. Justice is still.
Justice is still.
We haven't got there yet.
Okay, cool. I can work with that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Baba
Appreciate
Israel,
it.
great to have you.
Great to be here.
You're watching GRITtv. Fasten your seatbelts.
From the interview seat, now my man Jaco 440 makes a cipher complete. This is beatboxing, we talked about it before. Beatboxing, I like to do that instead of really starting these wars all across the globe. Who's in the judge's robe? Supreme Court, let's expand it, diversify, cure with Sotomayor. It's like that. We gotta see these current histories, current mysteries up in the place when I start to do it, when I start to invigorate. Now, what's your fate? Where will you go? How will you use your mind to make justice when you flow? Now, justice, let's discuss this. See, I'm disgusted with justice gets discarded. We have to see how justice work hard, cause we still need justice and skill. That's what we need to reverse this instead of going around the planet and kill. That's what I do when I start to manifest. Feel the beatbox in the place. It's the opposite of death. It's the breath that we spit here on GRITtv. Never will I reprimand you. Hanging with Laura Flanders on the spot when we interview. So I give you the cue like a theater story. When I break it down, make hip hop theater from here to another zone. Let my mind spray. I grew up in New York, but I'm moving to the UK. It's like that when I start to make the sounds on the track. Cause just in a few minutes, I'll be rocking a venue called Contact. And I won't just be performing, I'll be also not just workshopping. I'll be the artistic director and working with the amazingly talented young people. Cause it's a venue where young people feel they could really have a home. That's something we need in New York, a place where people can get in the zone. And that's what I do when I speak through the microphone. We can make a poem, flesh and the bone, unique in the place. You know what I mean? I'm never ever a clone, I'm full grown. Big shout out to my pop, Steve in Israel. Got the feel when I reveal, it's magically when we wheel. It's like a force field, so I can see and make the change. Feel the change, cause we still feeling the change is needed. We're not there, we're not completed. Our journey always there. Up in the place when I see, cause this moment is way too rare. It's like mystery, history, 100 years of double NAACP, CCP. Say, when I rock in a place for energy, slip the words, observe. Up in the place when I can rock with the sounds of a nerd or anyone under the sun. When I start to rise, a lot of rappers talk about guns, you won't find that in my eyes. No lies when I materialize, I'm not a material guy. Or like nice shirts for cool patterns, democracy in Dakar. And then the place when I rock, that's a great film which you can learn about Senegal. When I start to get into the zone, now hip-hop could be full of energy, you know it could be calm. If you want more information, check babaisrael.com. And now when I start to do it unorthodox, let's turn it to the human sound to break it down to the beatbox like